Welcome. The topic of this video is how to use the report generator screens that you find throughout SBC to create custom reports for yourself. I am in the inventory reporting screens, but you can use the rules that I'm going to teach you here in any of the report screens that you find, D4, F4, M4, S4, or really any screens that look similar to the one that you're seeing right now. I'm not going to teach you how to create a specific report. I'm going to show you how the screens function. So to get to where I am right now, I've gone to menu selection D and then 4. I typed in my clerk code, and depending on the security that your clerk code has will determine which buttons that you're seeing on the screen. So there may be different buttons that are displaying in this video than are showing up on your screen. If you'd like the ability to use some of those other buttons, you're going to want to ask your system administrator to adjust your security levels. So I'm going to start from the top down. I'm going to click on the Report Options button at the top of the screen. Upper left-hand corner is my report date. Unless you don't want to use today's physical date or the date that the report is going to run if you schedule it, you can type in a physical date here, and that will be the date that shows up on your piece of paper when you print out your report. If you have no reason to change that date, you can simply leave it as 0, and it's going to display today's date or the date that you eventually run this report if it happens to be scheduled. My report title is just that. It's going to be a title that prints across the top of my report. So I'm going to type something in here and then press my Enter key. On the far right hand side, you'll see that my cursor is now at Run Report in Background. I want to run the report in the background if I have a very long report or if I have a lot of criteria and it might take a minute or two for my report to be produced, so that my screen isn't waiting to produce that report and I can go on and do other things. The other reason I might want to run a report in the background is if I actually am not running it now, but I'd like to schedule it to run later. So in either of those cases, I would say yes, I want to run it in the background. And then notice my cursor goes to batch number. It's going to default to the batch number that's coming from my task. However, if I want to change that batch number, I can overtype that here. I'm going to press my home key. And then I'm going to go to the next option, which is my print options button, which is the button that's surrounded by a blue square. My output 2, I have the opportunity to print to paper. If I go to the printer, notice that some boxes will display asking me what printer that I want to go to and how many copies of my report that I want to see. If I go back to the output and I output to my screen, obviously that information is going to go away, and I can fill out the sheet the way that I'd like it to, and I'm going to print that information to my screen. If I'm printing something to my screen and I decide that I want it on paper, I'm going to need to go back in and rerun that report. PDF and text allow me to save files as a PDF or a text. Once I create the whole report and I press the Enter key to start, a window is going to pop up that will allow me to save it as one of those, and then will allow me to determine where I'm going to put that file. Email, if I click on the email, my email address opens. I can enter my email address, and then I can choose a format, whether I want to save it as a PDF or as a text. Send zip file. You only really need to zip it if you're sending a very large file. So if you're sending your whole history to a file, if you're sending an entire inventory value in detail, you perhaps want to send it as zip file. If you're just sending customer's history or something like that and it's not a very long file, you don't need to zip that up. I'm going to change my output to screen. My cursor is going to move down here to report format. I have the option to print in detail. In this case, I'm doing inventory. If I wanted to run in detail, I would get every single part in my inventory or that matches my criteria. Total allows me to run something such as an inventory value report, and it gives me a total per vendor line or per manufacturer line, where grand total is going to be just a single line on my screen that gives me a total dollar amount in that case. So I'm going to go back to detail. Cover page has to do with email. If I email it, do I want to send a cover page? Yes or no? And extended captions. My extended captions are the English words to my descriptions of what my headers are. Manufacturer, part number, description, quantity on hand. If I choose to populate the screen with a number of columns, I might want to say no here because the extended captions actually extend the distance between my columns. So if I'm wanting to put a bunch of stuff on the screen, I might want to not use the extended captions. And in that case, I would see MFG, P/N, QOH, or QH1, and so on. My detail line spacing allows me to put space between each line. If you leave it as a 1, it's going to look just like a book. So you have a line, then the enter key was pressed and the next piece of information is on the next line. If I change it to 2 or 3 or anything other than that, there's going to be additional spaces between each line of information. And top of format manufacturer allows me to do a page break between each of my lines of information. So if I'm running a report, an inventory value report, it'll do a page break for each vendor so that I have a little bit of a break between each vendor's information. The next place that my cursor is going to go is to field, and this is where I lay out how the report is going to look on paper. So I'm going to type in a couple of field letters, DES, QH1. If I'm not sure about my field letters or I want some help on this, I can click on the help button and notice that all of my field letters are described right here. If you go 2 columns over, you'll see a field that says format, and that actually is giving me the length of each of these fields. My manufacturer, the limit there is 3 characters. My part number is a limit of 15 characters, and my description is a limit of 25 characters, and so on. Now you'll notice the information that populated underneath each of these fields in the column area. That tells me where my column of information is going to start across my page. I have a limited number of characters across my page. The last field will always start at column 127. If I have a situation where I'm trying to put more columns of information onto my page than actually fit, I can change those numbers. So if I was to come back here, and remember from that table we saw that manufacturer was 3 characters. So if I was to look on paper, my manufacturer would fill up column number 3, column 4, and column 5. I'm going to give it a little bit of breathing room, so I'll go 6 and 7. And so I can start my part number as far to the left as column number 8. When I do that, it's going to move the information over to the left, so I have space left on the right-hand side of my page for additional columns of information. Same here. Perhaps I'm running a report for 3M. 3M part numbers are typically 5 characters long. So if I was going to do that, I would say my part number is going to fall in 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm going to give it some breathing room, 13, 14, and I'll start my description at number 15. Now, you will occasionally find that if you've set these up to run a 3M report and you go and try to run a different line report, that you're going to have information that overlaps. So if you're unsure about whether it's going to overlap, you'll want to test this either to your screen or to paper before you start printing out long documents. To put those numbers back to where they were, I go back to that field and I simply hit it 0, hit my enter key, and it will populate it with the default number of characters that the system is requiring for each of those fields. I'm going to press the home key, and that's going to take me back to the main screen, and I'm going to go to the third box, selection options. So selection options. I can come in here and the range, I can enter a range of parts. So I'm going to enter Wix, hit my enter key. My Wix line is going to show up. I'm going to click on the letter that I want to choose. And most of the time when you set up these screens, if you enter a front bookend, which is your manufacturer code with no part number, it's going to populate it with the rear bookend, manufacturer with all Z's. Remember, those are like parentheses around each of your lines. In the case that I wanted to change that, and maybe I didn't want to get my whole Wix line, but a specific range within that, I can always come up and edit this information. and as long as it's a valid part number, it'll leave this information up on my screen. There's two different places where I can add my manufacturer code if I don't want to use a range. One is here, MFG is Wix, and one is here in my compare options, MFG equals Wix. Now, the center filters area can be used as another line of compare options, but only when the information is an equal to both sides are equal. So let me give you an explanation of that. So DES, my mask will show up and I will put filter. This is an alpha field, and I'm saying that I want the description to equal filter, and then my wildcards, which are my asterisks there, are saying I'd like to see filter, and then any other information that follows filter in my descriptions. But if I was to come back here and try my QH1 field, because of the way that the field is designed, it won't let me use it. So you can absolutely use this filters area, but there are certain fields that won't work here. Number fields don't typically work, and date fields don't tend to work here either. I don't believe that price fields work either. Let's try that one. Nope. Price fields won't work here either. So if you're looking for where my manufacturer equals something or where my category equals something, those will absolutely work for you. Okay, the compare options down here. I can use where manufacturer equals, and I can also use where manufacturer does not equal, so I'm looking for all parts but a certain line. I can use greater than and less than. Those are used with numbers and dollars. I can use greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. Again, numbers, dollars, and dates. So I'm going to click on the not equals. It'll populate it with a pound sign, and then I can enter the value in the value or field area. I have the ability to enter 5 pieces of information here, and the way that I do that is by using this logical operator field. So if I click on the drop-down menu, I get an and, an or, a qualifies, and a completed. Those are my choices. So let's use and first. I want to look for where manufacturer is not manufacturer is not Wix, and perhaps where quantity on hand is greater than 0. I can do more, where my category equals SX, and so on. So I can add as many of these as I want to. I can come up here and I can say I want to look for where my manufacturer equals Wix, or where my manufacturer equals AC Delco. And when I do that, it's going to show me one set of parts and then another set of parts, because I'm asking for both of those in my criteria. Now let's say, for example, I wanted to look for a number of pieces of information that had different categories, but I wanted to look for all of this information under my Wix manufacturer. I have 2 ways I can do that. Actually 3 ways. The first way is to use my start and stop, Wix, and my bookends. And then I'm going to put where my category equals A, or where my category equals B. And that will allow me to run a report within my Wix line for any parts where my category is an A or my category is a B. The other area that I can do this is to put this information in my filter in the center of the screen. Manufacturer is Wix. The last place where I can put this is at the bottom of my logical operator listing here. Now the reason I want to put it last is because when I'm dealing with ORs and ANDs in my logical operator, I need my ANDs to be last. So, oops, I'm going to type in where my manufacturer is Wix, hit my enter key, and now it's going to look for anything where my category is A or my category is B and my manufacturer is Wix. You will find if you put your and in your or the other direction, you will not get what you're looking for. So make sure you do those in the correct direction. Okay, last suggestion or last option here is to use the logical operator that's called qualifies. That actually allows me to look at 2 different ranges of information. So I want to compare my sales by part this summer to my sales by part of last summer. So how I do that, I'm going to look at my dates of pieces sold. So I'm going to look for where my date sold field is greater than 2015-05/31. So that's last May. And my date last sold is less than 2015-09/01. So I'm looking at June, July, and August of 2015. And then I'm going to choose a Q for qualifies. And I'm going to say I want to look where my date of my last sale is greater than 2016-05/31, and where my date of last sale is less than 2016-09/01. Now what this is going to do is it's going to look for information within those two date ranges. It's not going to show me anything that happens in January or December or November. It is simply going to show me those two things in those two bubbles. And using that Q qualifier allows me to do this on one report, where before if I didn't have the Q I would have to run this separately. So that's a very helpful logical operator to keep in your bag of tricks. I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to space out my field information and I'm going to hit the home key. Okay, next is calculations. All right, so at the top of the screen you have percentage calculations. This is how you can build and determine things like gross profit. So if you know the fields that you're going to use up here, you enter them. I can determine what a cost is by saying list minus cost divided by list, and I'll be able to calculate certain things within these percent change fields. So those are available if you'd like to use them. The extension areas in the center of the screen allows me to add columns to the screen and add totals to the bottom. So if I want to perhaps extend my quantity on hand by my cost, that's going to create a column that is actually called EX1, and in that column you're going to find the totals by line for my inventory of each part extending or multiplying my quantity on hand by my current cost. It's going to give me my current inventory value for that particular part. Not only that, because I've put this column on the far right hand side of my screen, it's also going to give me a total at the bottom of my screen. Now I don't have to include that EX1 column, that's what it's called, in my document if I either don't have space or if I don't really want it, but it will still give me the total at the bottom hand portion of my screen. Now the last question there, treat negative extend by values as. This is saying if I end up with a negative value, perhaps I have a negative quantity on hand, do I want to make that a positive number? Perhaps in certain situations that would be a valid answer. Do I want to ignore it? So my negative quantity on hands are obviously incorrect. I just want to zero them out. Or do I want to really calculate those, which some people choose to do? So do I want those numbers to become a negative number so my grand total would actually have positive values and negative values that were creating the total? That's a decision that you would want to make per report. I'm going to click on negative here and then press my home key. And then the last area that is on this screen here is my updating area. Now my updating area has the ability to really mess up some of my tables. So I don't necessarily want to use this unless I know what I'm doing and unless I have the instructions to do so. There's an additional video here that is going to go through how to use the update option screens. So I'm going to press the home key, and the buttons across the bottom are where we're going to go next. So escape kicks me back out. If you have not saved this, then it is going to remove all of the changes that you've made and you'll have to start it over again. So I would suggest, even if you're doing a test to your screen, that you save the job. You can always delete it at a later time. Enter to begin. When I click that, it's going to start creating my report to my screen, or to paper, whatever my print options were up here at the top. Control P print screen allows me to print just what's going on this screen. Maybe I want to make sure that that doesn't get deleted. I want to make sure that I have all of my settings, or at least what my output file was like. So if you click on that print screen, it's going to print the screen that you're looking at right now. Change printer and Control F options on the far right actually just jump you back into the screen and allow you to edit some of the decisions that you've already made. So in the case that this is a saved library job and I click on the Change Printer button, it's going to give me a listing of all of my available printers. The Control F option is going to ask me questions that I've already answered, like do I want to use my extended captions, yes or no? Do I want to print a cover page? That's only applicable in certain situations, but yes or no. And then it pops me back to my main screen here. F5 Recall Job allows you to pull up a job that's already been saved in V1 to edit it. There will be an additional video that will be available on how to deal with the F5 Recall Job information. And then my button F7 to save my parameters. This is what I suggested before. If you ever spend a good amount of time creating a report, save it. You can always delete it later. So I'm going to do that for myself. I'm going to click on the Save Parameters, and I'm going to call this report INVV. Remember, I had just typed in the word title at my title earlier, so I'm going to type in a legitimate title here, Inventory Value. And because there are so many people at my office, I'm going to add my initials just in case. So if someone comes in and they're not sure who created it, they aren't going to delete it. If you have certain employees who should not see the report that you just created, you can change the security level up all the way to 99. And then this report will be inaccessible to anyone who has a lower security level than the one that you set in this field here. Password does kind of the same thing. It leaves the report in the actual list of available reports, but the employee has to have the password to access the setup for this report and has to have the password to be able to run this report in the future. I'm going to press the Enter key, and now my job has been saved. So I'm going to hit the Escape key real quick. I'm going to go back into my Inventory Custom Reports. I'm going to type in my clerk code, and now you'll notice in the upper left corner there's a default parameter. That's my blank sheet of how I'm going to set up my report, and here's my saved library job that I just created. If I want to run it, I click on it, and all I need to do is hit my Enter key to start running the job. Now remember, I had certain things that I showed up on my screen. Manufacturer, part number, description, and quantity on hand came from when I was entering the information into my output file. Category code, last sale, list, and cost actually came from all of those samples that I was giving you on how to use your filters. So the system automatically occasionally adds some of these fields to your output file. You'll want to check your output file before you run it if there's some of that information that you don't need on your screen. And on the far right, remember I had said that I wanted to extend my report by the quantity on hand. So that extended my quantity on hand here 5 times my cost of $3,000 with my total value on hand right now of $15,000. So if I was to run this all the way to the bottom of the screen, you would see a complete grand total of what my inventory value was. You'll notice in red in the center of the screen, it's going to tell me that for this particular vendor, this is my extension total. This is my grand inventory value total for this particular report. The buttons at the bottom of the screen will allow me to move around, and the F6 last button allows me to go to the very last page of the report in case that I just didn't want to see each of these pages. I just wanted to make sure that the information that I was requesting showed up on the page. Now how to delete this. So I've created this report. For whatever reason I don't need it anymore. If I click on the report, it's all set up and ready to go. I'm going to click on the Save Parameters. It's going to bring me up with my Enter Library Selection to Save, and it has saved in the name of the job that I created earlier. When I press the Enter key, it gives me the message, option already exists, replace it. When I say yes, it's basically wiped that report from the memory in the computer, and I need to press my Enter key again to go through the title, the level, and the password to resave my job. If at this point I hit the Escape key, and then I hit the Escape key one more time, you'll notice that my report is completely gone from my screen, and now all I have is my default. So again, to save the library job, I hit the F10 key. I'm just going to save anything. I'm going to give it a title. And when I come into my inventory screen, here's my saved library job. When I click on the library job to delete it, I hit the F10 key. I hit the Enter key through the name I already gave it. Yes, I would like to replace it, and then I hit the Escape key. Now, if by chance you hit the Escape key by accident and you didn't want to delete the report, it is still sitting here on the screen until you hit Escape again to go back out to the main menu. If you have any questions or if you have any problems, please always know that we are available to assist you. Call SBC at 800-829-4722 or email us at sbctraining@autolog.com. Thank you so much for joining us today.